Welcome to the Haunting Horror channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, put a like and write a comment on this video. Have a good time. The shadows in my room danced a familiar tango across the ceiling, a nightly performance choreographed by the flickering street lamp outside. Curled up in bed, I traced the patterns with my eyes, a comforting ritual before sleep. But tonight, the shadows whispered something new, a low, unsettling murmur just beyond my hearing. Usually, Mr. Midnight would be nestled at my feet, a purring ebony weight anchoring me to reality. But tonight, my bed felt strangely empty. A prickle of worry flickered across my skin. I called out softly, "Mr. Midnight." Silence. I tossed the covers back and padded to the door, the floorboards groaning their nightly complaints. "Mr. Midnight." I called again, my voice a threadbare whisper in the cavernous hallway. Still no answer. Panic began to coil in my gut, a cold serpent tightening its grip. Mr. Midnight had never strayed far at night. We were a team, two souls entwined by an unspoken language of powers and head nudges. I peeked into my parents' room, a sliver of light escaping from beneath the closed door. Relief washed over me momentarily. "Mom! Dad!" My voice sounded shaky even to myself. "Is Mr. Midnight with you?" The muffled murmur of voices stopped abruptly. The doorknob turned and my dad stood there, brow furrowed. "Fran, it's past your bedtime. Why aren't you in bed?" I couldn't find Mr. Midnight," I confessed, feeling a flicker of childish fear. He knelt before me, his warm hand engulfing mine. "Don't worry, sweetie," he said, his voice laced with amusement. "He's probably curled up on your favorite chair again. Go back to bed, and I'll check on him in the morning." I hesitated, the shadows in the hallway suddenly taking on a sinister cast. "Are you sure?" He ruffled my hair affectionately. "Positive. Now, shoo. We have a big day at school tomorrow." Back in bed, I stared at the ceiling, the shadows now morphing into grotesque shapes. The familiar comfort was gone, replaced by a gnawing disquiet. Had it been my imagination, or did the shadows seem darker tonight? And was the silence outside even deeper, punctuated only by the occasional distant howl of a dog? I pulled my knees to my chest, burying my face in the pillow. Mr. Midnight would be back soon. He always came back, but as the night stretched before me, a chilling thought crept in. What if he wasn't alone in the dark? Sleep came in fits and starts, plagued by dreams of inky tendrils reaching for my window, just beyond Mr. Midnight's desperate swats. The morning light filtering through the blinds was a harsh slap of reality, momentarily dispelling the lingering unease. I rushed out of bed, a desperate hope blooming in my chest. Maybe Mr. Midnight had snuck outside after all. I flung open the back door, the crisp morning air shock against my sleep-warmed skin. The patio furniture sat undisturbed, the morning dew sparkling innocently on the cobblestone path leading to the backyard. "Mr. Midnight," I called, my voice echoing eerily in the stillness. Silence. Panic clawed at its familiar spot in my gut. This wasn't like him. Mr. Midnight wouldn't abandon his post as my personal foot warmer, not willingly. Returning inside, I found my mom in the kitchen, humming cheerfully as she made pancakes. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said, her smile widening at the sight of me. "Did you sleep well?" "No," I admitted, forcing a smile. My voice sounded choked, thin. "Have you seen Mr. Midnight?" Her smile faltered for a second. "Not this morning, sweetie," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Did you check his favorite spots?" I nodded, the lump in my throat making speech difficult. "He wasn't anywhere." "Don't worry." My mom knelt before me, her eyes searching mine. Cats are good at finding their way back. He's probably just exploring the neighborhood. The logic felt hollow. Mr. Midnight wasn't one for grand adventures. He was content with the familiar warmth of the living room and the occasional foray into the backyard, supervised by yours truly. School was a blur. The rhythmic drone of the teacher's voice blended with the frantic whispers in my head. I jumped at every unexpected sound, my eyes constantly scanning the classroom for a flash of obsidian fur. During lunch, I sat alone, picking at my food, the unease festering into a full-blown worry. After school, I raced home, ignoring my friends' calls for me to join their soccer game. The house felt strangely quiet, the familiar scent of Mr. Midnight absent. My mom sat on the couch, her expression grim. "Honey," she began, a tremor in her voice. "The police are here." "They?" My heart hammered in my chest, a sickening drumbeat against my ribs. "The police? Why?" My voice came out as a squeak. She took a deep breath, her eyes welling up. They found your dad." The words hung heavy in the air, an unspoken truth settling like a shroud around the room. The world tilted on its axis. My dad? No, this wasn't happening. A choked sob escaped my lips, and before I knew it, I was collapsing to the floor, swallowed by the suffocating darkness. Consciousness returned in slow, agonizing waves. The sterile white ceiling swam above me, the harsh fluorescent light a beacon in the sea of nausea that swirled in my stomach. A rhythmic beeping filled the room, a relentless metronome keeping time with the hammering in my skull. A woman in crisp blue scrubs hovered over me, her face itched with concern. "Finally awake," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "Just a little dehydration and shock. You gave us quite a scare back there." Shock. The word echoed in the vast emptiness of my mind. What shock? Where was I? Memories flooded back in a torrent. The empty house, my mother's tear-streaked face, the police, my dad. I croaked, the words leaving my throat raw. The nurse's smile faltered. "He's gone, honey. I'm so sorry." Gone. The finality of the word slammed into me. My father, the man who always told the corniest jokes and made pancakes in the shape of animals on Saturdays, gone. It was impossible. A sob escaped my lips, tears blurring my vision. But what about Mr. Midnight? Did you find him? I clutched the bed sheets, the flimsy cotton offering little comfort. The nurse's brow furrowed. "Mr. Midnight? Who's that?" "My cat, Arast. He was gone too, last night." A flicker of hope, fragile yet persistent, ignited in my chest. Maybe Mr. Midnight had run away, scared by whatever had happened. Maybe they found him. "Honey," the nurse said gently, "there wasn't a cat with you when you arrived. Are you sure you remember correctly?" My heart plummeted. No, it couldn't be. Mr. Midnight had always been there, a silent, furry presence by my side. The shadows in my room, the emptiness of the house, it all made sense now. "But he was always with me," I whispered, a broken plea. The nurse patted my hand reassuringly. "Perhaps it was just a dream, sweetie. Now, why don't you get some rest? Your mom will be here soon." As the nurse bustled out of the room, the weight of my loss settled on me like a suffocating cloak. My dad, gone. Mr. Midnight, gone. Was this all just a horrible dream? Or was something far more sinister lurking in the darkness? A darkness that had stolen everything I held dear. My mother materialized beside the bed like a wraith, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from tears. Relief mixed with a fresh wave of grief as I reached for her hand, clinging to it like a lifeline. "Mom!" I choked out, my voice raw. "What happened?" She squeezed my hand tightly, the warmth of fragile comfort. "The police are still investigating," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "They said it was an accident. A break-in gone wrong. Accident." The image of the empty house, the unnatural stillness, clashed with her words. It didn't feel accidental. It felt ominous. "But Mr. Midnight," I began, the question hovering on my lips. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "Your cat. Honey, I told you the police didn't find any animal." My heart hammered like a frantic drum against my ribs. No cat. But it couldn't be real. Mr. Midnight had always been there, a constant shadow at my heels. The panic rising in my throat threatened to choke me. "Mom," I whispered, the words shaky and desperate. I dreamed of something. Last night. Before everything happened." The words tumbled out, a frantic stream of consciousness. I described the dream, the inky tendrils reaching for my window, Mr. Midnight batting at them furiously. The darkness, the fear so vivid it felt etched into my memory. My mother listened patiently, her brows furrowed in concern. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice soft, "it was just a dream. A bad dream brought on by stress. You probably saw something scary on TV or heard a strange noise outside." But a part of me rebelled against her rationalization. The dream felt real, more real than anything right now. "But what if it wasn't just a dream?" I pressed, my voice trembling. "What if?" I couldn't even voice the terrifying possibility lurking in the back of my mind. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then it was still just a dream," she insisted, her voice firm, maybe a little too firm. "Now the doctor says you need to rest. We'll talk about it later, okay?" Later. A word laden with unspoken anxieties. It felt like she was closing a door, shutting out the horrifying truth I craved to know. But I was too weak, too drained, to fight back. Exhaustion pulled me under, leaving me adrift in a sea of fragmented memories and unanswered questions. Sleep brought no solace. The dream, a grotesque tapestry of shadows and desperate mews, replayed on a loop in my mind. Waking was a harsh return to the sterile reality of the hospital room. The sterile white walls felt like a prison, confining me from the truth. My mother sat beside the bed, a worn copy of my favorite book, clutched in her hands. Her forced smile did little to hide the exhaustion etched on her face. "Feeling any better?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I nodded, the lump in my throat making speech difficult. "Can we go home?" A flicker of pain crossed her features. "Soon, honey. The police need to..." "Need to what?" I interrupted, a spark of defiance igniting within me. "Tell me what really happened." Her gaze dropped to the book in her lap. It's not easy, sweetie. They say it was an accident, a robbery that went wrong. Your father," her voice cracked, "he tried to stop them." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring her image. But a part of me refused to accept the official story. But the dream, the shadows in the window. My mother's hand tightened on the book, her knuckles turning white. "Just a nightmare, love. A manifestation of your grief." "But what about Mr. Midnight?" I blurted, the question burning a hole in my chest. "He was gone too, just like in my dream." She flinched, a flicker of something akin to fear crossing her face. "Honey, there was no cat. The police didn't find any animal." Her voice was clipped, almost desperate. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Why was she so dismissive of Mr. Midnight? Was there something she wasn't telling me? "Mom," I pleaded, my voice trembling, "please tell me the truth. What happened to Mr. Midnight?" Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Her eyes darted around the room, refusing to meet mine. Then, in a barely audible whisper, she said, "The doctor said, they think you might be experiencing trauma-induced hallucinations." Hallucinations. The word felt like a slap. Was she calling me crazy? But the memory of Mr. Midnight was so vivid, his fur as soft, his purr as comforting as it ever was. Tears streamed down my face, a torrent of frustration and fear. "No," I sobbed. "Mr. Midnight was real, and so was the dream." My mother reached out, her touch hesitant. "Honey," she murmured, "let's just get some rest. We can talk about this later." But later felt like a vast, unknown territory. And in the cavernous silence of the hospital room, a chilling suspicion began to take root. The shadows, the dream, Mr. Midnight's disappearance, were they all connected? The days blurred into a monotonous cycle of sterile meals, whispered conversations with my mom, and the constant beeping of the heart monitor. It felt like an eternity before the doctor finally deemed me well enough to return home. Stepping back into our house, a suffocating wave of emptiness washed over me. Every corner held a memory. My dad's booming laugh echoing in the living room, Mr. Midnight's soft fur brushing against my legs in the hallway. No, the silence was deafening. My mom bustled around, unpacking my meager belongings from the hospital. "Let's get you settled in, honey," she said, her voice strained. She avoided eye contact, her gaze flickering nervously around the room. The absence of Mr. Midnight's usual greeting hit me like a physical blow. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "where are his things? His food bowl, his favorite blanket?" She paused, her back stiff. "Honey," she began, her voice taking on a forced cheerfulness, "why don't you go unpack your bag? I'll take care of things here." But I wouldn't be dismissed. This wasn't just about a cat. Mr. Midnight's absence was a gaping hole in my world, a tangible representation of the secrets my mom seemed determined to keep. "Mom," I pressed, my voice stronger now, fueled by a growing sense of defiance. "Why are you acting like he never existed?" Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the already distorted reality. She finally turned, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and exasperation. "Honey," she sighed, "there was no cat. The police never found one. The doctor thinks you might have imagined him." Imagined. The word echoed in the vast emptiness of the room. Mr. Midnight had been my constant companion, a furry confidant who understood my silent woes and celebrated my quiet joys. How could she say he wasn't real? But the dream, I stammered, clutching at the last straw of hope. The shadows reaching for the window, Mr. Midnight trying to fight them off. Her face paled, a flicker of something akin to fear crossing her features. "Just a nightmare, sweetie," she said, her voice strained. "A manifestation of your grief." Grief for my dad, yes. But the fear, the unsettling feeling of being watched, that was different. That had started with the shadows in the dream, the same shadows that were now a constant presence in the back of my mind. "Mom," I pleaded, desperation lacing my voice, "there's something you're not telling me. Something about the night and Mr. Midnight." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My mom's gaze darted around the room, a storm of conflicting emotions brewing behind her eyes. It was clear she wanted to tell me something, but something held her back. As the day wore on, the shadows seemed to lengthen, stretching across the floor like grasping fingers. The house, once a haven of warmth and laughter, now felt cold and menacing. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the inky darkness outside my window, a chilling truth began to solidify. There were more secrets in this house than anyone was willing to admit. The following days were a blur of suffocating silence and unanswered questions. My mother, a ghost of her usual vibrant self, floated through the house, her eyes rimmed with red and her voice perpetually strained. Mr. Midnight's absence was a constant thrumming ache in my chest. One afternoon, while searching for a book to distract myself, I stumbled upon a dusty box tucked away in the back of my dad's old study. Curiosity piqued. I knelt and brushed away the cobwebs. A faded inscription on the lid read, "Unexplained phenomena." My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What were these unexplained phenomena my dad was so interested in? Maybe, just maybe, there were answers hidden amongst these dusty files. Hesitantly, I pried the lid open, revealing a trove of newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and even a few crude sketches depicting shadowy figures and strange symbols. A shiver danced down my spine as I glanced at a chilling headline: "Local family reports encounters with eerie shadows." As I delved deeper, a horrifying picture began to emerge. For years, my dad had been obsessed with a local legend. Whispers of a malevolent entity that lurked in the shadows, feeding on fear and despair. He documented every reported encounter, every sighting, every inexplicable event. A cold dread coiled in my stomach. Could this shadow creature from the legend have something to do with what happened that night? With Mr. Midnight's disappearance? My eyes landed on a crumpled note scribbled in my dad's hurried handwriting. It read, "Shadows, reaching for window. Heard Franz scream. Fought them back. They vanished." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the words. My dad had seen the shadows. He heard me scream, and he had fought them back. Tears turned to rage, a hot ember igniting in my chest. My mom had said the whole thing was an accident, that the shadows were just a product of my grief. But what if they were real? What if my dad's research had gotten him in over his head? Just then, I heard a voice behind me. "Honey, what are you doing?" My mom stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. I slammed the box shut, a desperate need for answers bubbling over. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "these shadows, what do you know about them?" Her face contorted in a flicker of panic. "Shadows? What shadows?" she stammered, her voice tight. I held her gaze, refusing to back down. The shadows my dad was researching. The ones you don't want to talk about. A moment of tense silence stretched between us. Then, with a sigh heavy with resignation, she sank onto a nearby chair. "It's a long story," she said, her voice barely a whisper. And so my mom began to talk, her voice trembling as she recounted the chilling truth. My dad's obsession with the shadows, his growing conviction that they were more than just a local legend. And finally, the terrifying night they had attacked our home, the night my dad had vanished. As I listened, a horrifying picture formed in my mind. Mr. Midnight wasn't just gone. He had somehow fought off the shadows, protecting me at the cost of his own existence. A fresh wave of grief washed over me, mingled with a burning determination. I wouldn't let the darkness win. I wouldn't let Mr. Midnight's sacrifice be in vain. The hunt for the truth had just begun. The weight of my mother's confession settled on me like a suffocating shred. My dad gone. Mr. Midnight gone. Both victims of a malevolent entity that lurked in the shadows. Fear, a primal and unwelcome guest, slithered into every corner of my mind. But beneath the fear, a spark of defiance ignited. "We have to do something," I declared, my voice surprisingly firm. "We can't just sit here and wait for those things to come back." My mom looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and fear. "Honey," she said, her voice trembling. We don't even know what they are. How do we fight them? I didn't have the answer, but I knew giving in wasn't an option. My dad's research, I said, my mind racing. Maybe there's something in there, some way to defend ourselves. We returned to my dad's study, the room cloaked in an eerie silence. The box on the desk loomed large, a tangible reminder of the secrets it held. With trembling hands, I opened it once more. Hours melted away as we pored over the contents. My dad's meticulous notes documented encounters, theories, and even symbols that seemed to recur in the legends. There were also sketches, grotesque figures with inky tendrils and eyes that burned with an unholy light. A chill danced down my spine as I pointed at a symbol scrawled across a newspaper clipping. "This one," I whispered. "It looks familiar." My mom leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "It's everywhere," she murmured, tracing the symbol with her finger. "In the sketches, the notes, it's like a signature." Suddenly, a memory surfaced. The dream, the shadows reaching from my window, their inky forms adorned with the same chilling symbol. A gasp escaped my lips. "The shadows in my dream," I said, my voice tight with dread. "They had this symbol too." We exchanged a horrified look. The shadows weren't just a figment of my grief-stricken imagination. They were real, and they were connected to this malevolent entity my dad had been researching. "There has to be something," I pleaded, desperation gnawing at my resolve. "Some way to fight them off." Just then, a dog-eared book tucked in the corner of the box caught my eye. Its title, "Forgotten Lore, Defenses Against the Unseen," gleamed with a faint, hopeful promise. Maybe, just maybe, within its pages lay the key to defeating the darkness that had stolen my world. With trembling hands, I opened the book, the musty scent of aged paper filling the air. The hunt for answers, and perhaps even a chance at redemption, had taken a perilous turn. The book, Forgotten Lore, Defenses Against the Unseen, felt heavy in my trembling hands. Its faded leather cover whispered promises of forgotten knowledge, a beacon of hope in the terrifying darkness that had engulfed our lives. My mom sat beside me, her eyes following the lines of text as I devoured them with desperate hope. The book spoke of ancient rituals, wards against malevolent entities, and symbols of protection. One passage in particular sent a jolt of excitement through me. The mark of luminescence, a sigil woven from moonlight and courage, said to repel creatures of shadow. "This could be it," I whispered, tracing the intricate symbol etched onto the yellowed page. "A way to fight back." My mom's expression remained grave. "But the ritual, it requires specific ingredients, a full moon, and immense concentration. Honey, this is dangerous." I understood her fear, but fear wouldn't save us. "We have to try, Mom," I said, my voice resolute. "This is the only chance we have." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. We gathered the required ingredients: herbs from a dusty apothecary shop, a vial of moonlight captured under the clear night sky, and a silver pendant that had belonged to my grandmother. The night of the full moon arrived, cloaking the house in an eerie silver light. We set up the ritual space in my dad's study, the air thick with anticipation and a touch of fear. My mom, ever the pragmatist, insisted on calling a local priest, a kind old man with a twinkle in his eye and a surprising knowledge of forgotten lore. Together, we chanted the words from the book, my voice shaky at first, then growing stronger with each repetition. We traced the mark of luminescence in the air, weaving moonlight and intention into a shimmering shield. The house creaked and groaned around us, the shadows seeming to writhe in protest. A cold gust of wind slammed against the window panes, rattling the frames. Fear threatened to consume me, But I held my ground, fueled by a mix of grief and defiance. Just as the ritual reached its climax, a blood-curdling shriek tore through the night, a sound that sent shivers down my spine and made the hairs on my arms stand on end. A crack resonated through the house, followed by an unsettling silence. Cautiously, we approached the window. The once oppressive darkness was gone, replaced by the cool, silver glow of the moon. The oppressive feeling of fear had lifted, replaced with a fragile sense of hope. Did it work? I whispered, my voice barely a breath. The priest smiled, a weary yet triumphant glint in his eyes. For now, child. But shadows have a way of returning. Stay vigilant. His words were a sobering reminder of the battle we had just begun. We had fought back the darkness, but the war was far from over. Looking at my mom, her face etched with worry and a flicker of relief, I knew this wouldn't be the last time we faced the shadows. We were forever bound to this fight, forever marked by our encounter with the unseen. But as I held the silver pendant clutched in my hand, a symbol of hope and resilience, a new determination bloomed within me. We may have lost Mr. Midnight, but his sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. We would stand guard against the darkness, protecting our home, protecting each other. And maybe, just maybe, someday we would find a way to bring the light back into our lives. Weeks blurred into months, the memory of the ritual a constant presence hanging in the air. The oppressive feeling of fear had lifted, replaced by a watchful tension. My mom and I jumped at every creak of the floorboard, every flicker of the lights. We slept with the silver pendant, the mark of luminescence etched on its surface, clutched tightly in our hands. One sunny afternoon, while sorting through some of my dad's belongings, I stumbled upon a worn leather-bound journal tucked away in a drawer. Its yellowed pages were filled with my dad's handwriting, detailing his research on the shadows. A chill danced down my spine as I flipped through the entries, each one a chronicle of his growing obsession with the unseen. But then something caught my eye. A single page, tucked near the back, had a different feel to it. The handwriting was less hurried, more deliberate, and the language was cryptic, filled with symbols and strange diagrams. It looked like a code, a message my dad hadn't had time to decipher. "Mom," I called, rushing into the kitchen where she was making tea. "Look at this." She peered over my shoulder, her brow furrowing as she studied the page. "Honey," she said, her voice tight, "I don't understand any of this." "Neither do I admitted, frustration gnawing at me. "But it has to be important. Maybe it's a clue, something Dad was working on before." My voice trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Days turned into a blur of frantic research. We scoured the internet, haunted dusty libraries, and even contacted a local occult expert, a wizened old woman with knowing eyes and a raspy voice. But the code remained a mystery, its secrets locked away from us. Just as despair began to settle in, a breakthrough arrived from the most unexpected source. While browsing through one of my dad's old astronomy books, I noticed a faint inscription scrawled on the margin. It was the same symbol that appeared throughout the coded message. Excitement bubbled through me. Could this be the key? With trembling hands, I compared the symbol to the various astronomical charts in the book. Then it hit me. The symbol wasn't just a symbol. It was a constellation. "Mom!" I yelled, rushing into the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. "I think I figured it out." A look of hope flickered in her eyes as I explained my discovery. The coded message, when translated using the constellation as a key, revealed a location, a hidden cave deep within the nearby woods, a place my dad believed to be the source of the shadows. A mixture of fear and determination coursed through me. This cave could hold the answers we desperately craved, the reason behind the shadows, and maybe even a way to bring Mr. Midnight back. But it could also be a death trap, a place where the darkness held its true power. "We have to go," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We have to see what's there." My mom hesitated, her face itched with worry. "Honey," she began, her voice trembling, "it's too dangerous." "What if?" "We can't just sit here," I interrupted, my voice firm with a newfound resolve. "We owe it to Dad. We owe it to Mr. Midnight." Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, my mom took a deep breath. "All right," she said, her voice resigned, "but we'll be careful." A nervous smile spread across my face. We might be heading into the heart of darkness, but this time, we weren't going in blind. We had the knowledge my dad left behind, the protection of the mark of luminescence, and most importantly, we had each other. As we packed our bags, a sliver of hope, fragile yet persistent, flickered within me. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of our story. It might just be the beginning. The woods seemed to hold their breath as we ventured deeper, sunlight filtering through the dense canopy overhead in dappled patches. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. My mom gripped a flashlight in one hand and a silver knife, a souvenir from the occult shop, in the other, her face etched with a mixture of determination and fear. "Are you sure this is the right way?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chirping of unseen birds. I consulted the worn map I'd painstakingly recreated from my dad's notes. "According to this," I said, my voice tight, "the cave entrance should be just up ahead." The path narrowed, the trees crowding in around us, their branches clawing at our clothes like skeletal fingers. Just when I thought the oppressive darkness of the woods might consume us entirely, we stumbled upon it, a gaping maw in the side of a rocky cliff, shrouded in an unnatural chill. "This is it," I breathed, a tremor running through my voice. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a mix of fear and morbid curiosity churning in my stomach. We exchanged a nervous glance, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. Taking a deep breath, I pulled my jacket tighter around me and stepped towards the cave entrance. "Wait," my mom said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Let's at least see if we can get some light in there." She rummaged in her backpack and emerged with a box of matches. Striking one, she held the flickering flame to a bundle of dry leaves gathered from the forest floor. The leaves sputtered to life, casting an eerie orange glow that danced and flickered on the cave walls. Armed with our makeshift torch, we cautiously ventured inside. The air grew thick and stale, the smell of damp earth and something vaguely metallic filling my nostrils. The only sounds were the dripping of unseen water and the ragged rhythm of our own breathing. The tunnel sloped downwards, the ceiling pressing lower with each step. We clung to the rough walls, navigating the uneven ground with careful steps. The further we went, the colder the air grew, as if the cave itself was actively trying to expel us. Maybe this was a bad idea, my mom whispered, her voice barely a hiss. "We can't turn back now," I said, my voice surprisingly firm despite the fear gripping me. "We've come too far." Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a cavernous space. The flickering light from our makeshift torch revealed jagged rocks jutting from the floor and strange symbols etched onto the walls. And in the center of the cavern, a swirling vortex of inky darkness pulsed with an ominous energy. My breath hitched in my throat. The shadows, here in their heartland, they seemed to throb with an unholy light, emanating a chilling power that sent shivers down my spine. "It's beautiful," and terrifying. My mom murmured, her voice a mixture of awe and dread. But before we could dwell on the unsettling beauty of the sight, a guttural growl echoed through the cavern, the sound sending a jolt of terror through me. Emerging from the inky vortex were two monstrous figures, their bodies composed of writhing shadows, their eyes burning with an unholy light. This was it, the heart of the darkness, the fight we had been dreading, the battle for our lives, and maybe, just maybe, the chance to bring Mr. Midnight back. As the shadows lunged, a desperate cry tore from my throat, a battle cry fueled by grief, determination, and a sliver of hope. The fight had just begun. The cavern erupted into chaos. The monstrous shadows, their forms a writhing tapestry of darkness, lunged at us with a bone-chilling shriek. My mom, adrenaline surging through her veins, parried a blow from one creature with her silver knife, the metal clanging against the inky tendril. "We have to fight them back," I yelled, my voice barely audible above the cacophony of growls and the crackle of our dying torch. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but the image of Mr. Midnight, his soft purrs, his unwavering loyalty, fueled a fire of defiance within me. Drawing on the lessons from the book, I chanted the words of a protective spell, my voice shaky at first, then growing stronger with each repetition. A shimmering shield of light flared around me, momentarily pushing back the encroaching darkness. My mom, inspired by my actions, grabbed a fistful of the herbs we brought, blessed under the full moon's glow. With a battle cry, she flung them at the shadows. The herbs erupted in a burst of white light, momentarily stunning the creatures. We used the brief respite to retreat deeper into the cavern, the inky figures hot on our heels. The air grew colder, the darkness thicker, a stifling presence threatening to suffocate us. Suddenly, a glint of silver caught my eye, a metal chain dangling from the rocky ceiling, barely visible in the flickering light. An idea, desperate yet daring, sparked in my mind. "Mom," I gasped, pointing at the chain. "Can you reach it?" She followed my gaze, her brow furrowing in thought. "Maybe," she said, her voice strained. "But what are you thinking?" The ritual book mentioned a binding spell. I explained, my voice breathless. "If we can trap them." Without waiting for a reply, I scrambled up the uneven wall, using the rough protrusions as handholds. My heart hammered against my ribs, adrenaline masking the fear gnawing at my insides. Reaching the chain, I grabbed it with both hands. It was icy cold, its touch sending a jolt through me. Yelling for my mom to distract the creatures, I pulled with all my might. The chain groaned in protest. Then, with a resounding clang, a heavy metal object plummeted down from the darkness above. A moment later, a massive stone slab crashed against the ground, blocking the entrance to the cavern with a deafening thud. Dust filled the air, momentarily obscuring everything. When it settled, we were trapped, the inky figures swirling menacingly on the other side of the barrier. My chest tightened with a mixture of relief and dread. We were safe for now, but trapped with the very darkness we were trying to banish. "We did it," my mom whispered, her voice trembling slightly. But the victory tasted hollow. The binding spell wouldn't hold forever, and we were still deep within the heart of the shadow's lair. Looking at the swirling vortex in the center of the cavern, a question bloomed in my mind. Was this all there was, or was there something else? Something more to this place, something that held the key to bringing Mr. Midnight back. As I gazed into the inky depths, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A faint outline, barely discernible within the swirling darkness, seemed to solidify for a moment. It was the shape of a cat, a familiar shape, filled with a faint, ethereal light. My breath hitched in my throat. A single word escaped my lips, a desperate plea filled with a sliver of hope. Mr. Midnight.